Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 61 of the CornerBlue. I'm Hugo Alvarado, and I'm here with Andres Rico. And we have Nations League coming up. The national team is getting activated again. We have una convocatoria nueva, a few surprises there. And how you been, Andres?
Good. Just excited that, finally the list came out after waiting a couple weeks. It was cool that we sat down with Coach Hugo Perez last time, and he gave us a couple clues as to some of the changes that were going to happen. And lo and behold, there was some things that I didn't even expect that were going to happen, but we'll get into that in a little bit. But just want to say happy third anniversary, Hugo.
Can't believe it. It feels like yesterday. So now that I think about it, I was like, yeah, we started this right in the middle of the pandemic.
Smack dab in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Waiting for the curve to flatten. But in any case, I just want to thank everybody that's been listening to us since then, always checking in, always interacting with us, liking the post, making us feel like we're not just putting something out into like a black hole. Like there's people on the other end of all this. So it's great to have that support from y'all, but also too, to welcome to anyone new, because, it was a pleasant surprise that the last interview got, picked up by some media outlets in El Salvador. So it was cool that, I think we got some outreach to an audience that we hadn't gotten previously. So if you're new to the CornerBlue, welcome. This is a podcast that Hugo and I started 3 years ago, almost to the date, where we just decided, what if we created some content in English to deal with things all about La Selecta, the lows, some of the highs, but mostly the lows, unfortunately. And since then, it's been an amazing journey of being able to talk with players, the dual nationals, the coaching staff. We were able to talk with Hugo Perez back in the day, even before he was hired. So just been a great experience so far. And I think it was pretty cool that right on that third anniversary, one of our videos took off a little bit. So I'm definitely grateful for everyone that's been supporting, and then everyone that's new.
Yeah, thank you. We never thought that it was mostly intended for English speakers, and for those of us who are learning English like me. And suddenly, the Salvadorian media is picking up on the podcast. That's pretty cool. Unfortunately, we didn't really get the credit on some of the articles that just mentioned that a podcast.
But
English,
some of our listeners kind of held them up to it. So yeah, I appreciate everyone repping and giving us a shout out despite that. But as they say, I guess any type of publicity is good publicity. So
yeah, true. Yeah. So I'm I've been enjoying this. So, it's it gives us, a way to just to share personal thoughts. As some of I do scouting for the national team. When I'm here, I try to stay on point and just generate my opinions based on my personal thoughts, not to get involved in what's my role with scouting and this podcast that we started before I was officially the scout. So it's been great, and I'm looking forward to having more guests come in. We might even have a Spanish speaker guest at some point. Why not? Andres can translate. He's very good at that. So we'll see. We might have some surprises soon, hopefully.
Yeah, no, that's something that I think would be very positive in terms of also reaching, another type of audience, but also just trying to keep the essence of the show where, our take is trying to stay as constructive and neutral in a sense, but also give our opinions without having to be pundits. Because I think that's something that is very common in the sports world or in terms of sports content is the punditry. And, from my vantage point, I'm just trying to express, my opinions, my views. I'm not going to, put anybody down. It's just observations. And sometimes I'm going to be subjective, obviously, with my own views. But I think the goal of this podcast more than anything is just to try and look at things from a different optic, than, let's say, people tend to get of La Selecta, because, we're one of the few out programs or content existence that covers a team in English. And I think you and I sleep better night knowing that we're trying to put something positive out there, or just a space where we can share thoughts without having to play into kind of like the more traditional methods used sometimes in sports media. So in any case, today we wanted to talk about the list that was published, what was it, yesterday, by Hugo Perez. As we mentioned, there's some surprises that we didn't even see coming, even after having spoken to the coach himself last month. So Hugo, do you want to go over the list, read it off, or is there anything that sticks out in your mind so far?
Well, for me, what sticks out is the return of some players like Armando Moreno. I think he has earned a spot in this call up. He's been doing a lot of good work to deserve to be called. Obviously, I think for many the inclusion of Dustin Correa is a big surprise. Joaquin, I'm not too surprised about Joaquin. I always, and some people may disagree with me, I always thought of him as a player who has he has performed in the national team. I think he's done well in the national team. And obviously with the inclusion of Brian Hill, it's a tough one to compete with Brian and his style. But Joaquin, it's a versatile player who can, play as a second striker at some point. De Los Cobos used him as a wing at some point, even though he might not be a winger. But I think that the inclusion of those players, I'm looking forward to it. Overall, before we go into the specifics of the list, I think it's a very well balanced list for what's coming up. I think the games are not going to be easy games. As we know, Guatemala has been getting really good results. I think the stadium is already sold out. There's been a lot of hype around the Guatemalan national team, but most of it has taken place in the States, whether that's in friendly games or the Gold Cup. So this is like the I don't want to say the first time, but it's been a while since they played at home an official match after their pretty good streak of games that they've been having. So I don't think that that game specifically is one where you want to put a lot of youngsters or anything like that. So I do think I'm very pleased with the list.
Yeah, looking at it at a first glance, I'd say I'm happy to see some tweaks going on in the midfield and the attack. That's something that Coach Perez had mentioned was going to be taking place. I wasn't expecting Jairo to be taken out or left out of this list, but then you see some of the replacements and it starts to look like, okay, he's going to weigh out his options. I read earlier in social media, Pájaro Picon had his post where, he had checked in with Jairo and supposedly he's dealing with some type of work permit stuff. So, that's as much as I know in terms of that situation. It might have influenced the no call up or the omission of his name in the list. But before we dive into it, do you want to read the list, or I can just read the list? It's all
just
good.
Go for it. Yeah, if all you have it handy.
Yeah. So keepers, we have Super Mario, and his backup most likely is Tomas Romero, even though, it's still up for grabs. But I'd say right now, Super Mario kind of has the upper hand in terms of being the starter. In defense, we have Echelon, Eric Zavaleta, who just played against the Quakes. The Galaxy won, unfortunately for me, since I'm a Quakes fan. But also called up is Rudy Clavel from FAS, Germán Fuentes, who we assumed was going to be called up based off of our talks with Coach Perez, Erika Valseta, Roberto Dominguez, Alex Roldan, Brian Tamacas, Nelson Flores, and the outlier in this group, I would say, would be Alejandro Enriquez, Jairo's little brother who plays in Metapan. Then in the midfield, the call-ups were for Melvin Cartagena, Eric Calvillo, Chicho Orellana, Cristian Martinez, Rafael Tejada, who I've heard a couple things from FAS, but I haven't seen him play. The Ghost, Dustin Correas, and Amando Moreno. Then on top, you have Brian Hill, Emerson Mauricio, another, new call-up, Mayer Hill, Joaquin Rivas, and then Machito Menjivar. So that's the new list for the squad that'll be at the match on the 7th against Guatemala and the 10th in San Salvador against Trinidad and Tobago. So yeah, anything that comes up in terms of the defense for you?
I think defense we've been solid. I think we have a pretty, except with the exception of the left back position, which we've talked about before. I think Jairo's brother plays as a left back. Now I think he played for the U22. Nelson Blanco, if he's included in that list, it's probably because he's able to travel. So he's, in terms of experience in the left back, if you're going to use a native left back, he probably has an advantage over Enriquez. But I think in the center back, I think most likely is going to be Zavaleta Cabalceta, the Eric Cabalceta and Eric Zavaleta duo. But as we know, sometimes Eric or any of them can get injured, and probably Roberto Dominguez has not been having his best moments. None of the Salvadorian teams have been having a good time right now. They have been destroyed, unfortunately, in the Copa Centroamericana. So, and then you have Germán Fuentes, who, this is it's an opportunity with the limited amount of windows to look at players. I think the coaching staff would take this as an opportunity to see him. I'm not sure if he's going to get to play or not. He might get some minutes, but I think the probably will be Cabalceta and Zavaleta in the center back, and Tamacas will probably continue to be our right back. So yeah, I think in defense, I think we're doing all right with that big question mark on the left side.
Yeah, I think most likely it'll be Nelson playing on the left. Because as Coach Perez mentioned, I think the experiment or the priority of using Roldan almost as that utility player of, sometimes having to start on the left as left back, I think, those days hopefully are over intentionally, right? I was just thinking of one concept since we spoke with Coach Perez of free Roldan. Like, I think it's time to start building the team around him, and another pillar that he's been using consistently, which is Chicho. If you can find that midfield duo, the box to box or getting down one of the flanks and just creating more connectivity with the offense. I think that is kind of the explanation as to why you don't see Kevin Reyes, why you don't see Josh Perez in this call up. And I mean, you can interpret it in several ways, but you can even include Heidel in that group as well. Of we had wingers during Gold Cup that they'd receive the ball, maybe get a couple steps in, maybe take on one player, but then just kind of run out of space or steam, and that was the end of the play. And I think that's one huge thing that needs to be corrected with El Salvador's offense is how do you get that nine involved? How do you get the midfield involved? And how do you work on that cohesiveness that's been mentioned previously? And I think by bringing in an Amando Moreno, possibly Calvillo, it seemed like Hugo Perez has been keen on him as the 10. But for me, just seeing Amando Moreno back into the mix just brings into mind just that connectivity that we saw for La Selecta and Gold Cup 2021, where there was, space being filled in the last third in a way that wasn't once he was injured and out of the team. So that's what I'm hoping for, is to see more space filled in during the attack that we haven't seen. Seeing Roldan being able to, run down the right flank and get those touches into the box as he does with Sounders. I know someone mentioned on Twitter that, they weren't necessarily happy to see Rivas in the mix. I am, in the sense that I've seen how he's combined with people when there's that space or those touches, and there is a level of connectivity that you get with Rivas. It's just during the octagonal, there wasn't that space being filled up, the passes being given to him, or he wasn't being fed the ball in the box in a way that could create chances or put him under the limelight in a sense. So I think Brian Hill has the 9 spot, completely secure. I think we would see Rivas either coming in possibly as a winger more than a 9, or as a sub in case Brian gets injured or gets tired. But more than anything, I see a more possibility of a connection in the midfield, of touches, of being able to build up a play rather than just passing it on the flank and then hoping that the winger miraculously gets by 2 or 3 players and then connects with the 9. And I think that's how the office went in Gold Cup, and it didn't go anywhere. There's a reason they only scored 1 goal, and there wasn't even build up to it. It was just touches in the box and a long ball from Super Mario to Brian Hill, and that was it. So yeah, we need we need that connection in the midfield. And then obviously the other huge part of the news or the surprise is the inclusion of Dustin Correa after a long hiatus. He was called up for the European tour prior to the 2021 Gold Cup, yet there were some issues because Dustin was coming off of winning a chip with FAS, didn't present himself at a certain time to the fast food, the hotel there, and due to that, Hugo Perez decided to take disciplinary actions. But it appears that fences have been mended, and now Dustin is back. What are your thoughts on that, Hugo?
Yeah, I mean, I think it sends a message. As we spoke, Andres, I think it sends a good message that what Hugo Perez has been saying during the last 2 years, whenever people ask about Dustin, it's proven to be right. He wasn't banned from the team. It's just that at that time he wasn't fitting into the squad in the way that he wanted a player like Dustin. So I think it sends a clear message to those other players who think that Hugo has his set squad. That it's not. There's the national team is not close to anyone, and I think for me that's a positive. That's a positive thing about the Dustin call up. How he's going to perform with the national team, I don't know. I think uh, he's been a pretty consistent player uh, in the national team. If I focus strictly on what happens on the field, I think he can bring some interesting things to the table. He has a very good left foot. He can be a very sneaky player in the 1v1. He's an interesting player, I think, to be there. And when you also consider the performance again, I mean, if you really think about it, if you take a minute to think about it, the the teams that should be in their best possible shape right now are those teams who participated in the Copa Centroamericana, because they had friendlies prior to the tournament. As you remember, we didn't know if the league was going to start or when the league was going to start, but those teams continued training because they had this tournament coming up. So, given also the poor performance of Salvadorian teams, your choices for the national team coach are limited. They're limited. I'm not strictly saying that that's the reason Dustin was called, but when you consider the overall performance of those teams who participated in the Copa Centroamericana, he was probably one of the most consistent players for FAS in this case. So for me, it's that's the positive sign. I continue to see an Hugo Perez who continues to check out different players, whether that's abroad or locally, to continue to broaden our pool of players, which I have always said for years that that's a positive thing. It's good for a national team whenever it's not the same 15 players being called all the time, but when you have variations. And that's the part that I don't understand when I hear the criticism from El Salvador, like about the microciclos. I just heard a couple of days ago. I'm going a little bit off topic, but I just don't understand the mentality where I think Mr. Lisandro Paul was saying, like, what's the point of he agreed with whatever the Once Deportivo president put out there, and he said, yeah, what's the point of the microciclos if you call 11 players to the microciclos but you don't call him, or you only call one to the official call-ups? And I'm like, aren't you saying, because the media has been saying in El Salvador for a while, and you even brought it up here, Andres, that we want to see, or that you want to see more of a base team, right? And I think we've had a base team, and the microciclos are not because you're going to call up all of the 11 new players who you call to the microciclo. You call those 11 or 15 players who have not been part of the national team to a microciclo, so you can take a look at them, so you can see if any of them are up for the task, to see if there's any of those players who will be capable to adjust and adapt with that base of players that we have. So when I hear that, I don't understand. Like I understand there's like a big focus on trying to create controversy around everything national team. I understand that generates clicks. Controversy generates more likes. I understand that, but if you're looking at it from strictly from a sports mind perspective, the microciclos are the only chances where a coach has an opportunity to evaluate a player that he's maybe seen in a local league game, and you're like, okay, that player looks interesting. We should bring it in to see how he performs and how he does with what we want. That is the whole purpose. look, if the coach could have all of his starters for the microciclos, or if he could have his 23 players for the microciclos available, he will call them up. He will have them. But the reality is that's not possible. You can't bring 7, 8, 9 players from MLS, USL, Colombia for microciclos. That's not possible. So if you have if you have the teams that have most of the players that you're planning to call up, if you have them competing in the Copa Centroamericana, like why would you hold a microciclo? And I'm being specific more to the last one that was canceled. There was a lot around that. So there's just things that don't make sense. So for me, it's like the microciclos are the perfect opportunity to look at players. It doesn't mean that all those players in the microciclo will get called, but we've seen it. At least one of them gets called up because the players, the coach observed something interesting in them, and that is the only way that those new players are going to continue. The more players are going to be added to the pool are the microciclos. For the coach to get to know them, and for those who the coach already knows, for them to be evaluated in terms of how fit they are. We've been hearing a lot of things about, the players getting to the national team and they're not fit for national team international competition. And that's one of the things that he touched upon in the last time we had him here, that when you get to the 70th minute and you don't have enough oxygen going into your brain, you make poor decisions. And we've seen poor decision making that had really cost us games lately. So that's what the microciclos are for, in my
Yeah,
opinion, at least.
I mean, you don't even have to go too far as to what other countries in Central America are doing, but also reference points in CONCACAF, like the US, Mexico, where they have multiple competitions to send squads to. Sometimes that they coincide within the same month. So back in the days when Mexico was playing Copa America and Copa Oro, they'd send their A squad to Copa America. They'd send the U23s with a couple of veteran players to reinforce that squad to play Copa Oro. The same thing US has done with Gold Cup. The same thing they've done with now the Nations League, where you saw completely different squads. The US has their infamous January camp that they get to do because of MLS's break, and that's a chance for the national team to keep their local players, their domestic players in the mix and create a pool and keep tabs on them. That's their version of it. Ours is the microciclos. We don't have Copa UNCAF anymore, where you could grab most of your local guys and have a tournament in January and have them for 2-3 weeks and have a camp that way through an official tournament in that sense. We don't have that anymore. What needs to be done is what happens in Guate, what happens in Costa Rica, where despite having their schedule for their leagues, they're like, hey, oh, we have important national team match dates. Let's alter our schedule. That way, we can prioritize the national team and give them more time to bring the pieces together. And that's something that, for whatever reason, just is like vinegar or oil and water in El Salvador, where just, something that's very, very logical, very intuitive, just is very polarizing in El Salvador, because everyone's thinking, in their own interests. And by doing so, you create all this drama, in the press, on social media, just, I don't know, just kind of like this toxicity that is always in the air, and all these weird contradictions of people saying, los microciclos no sirven, and then when they cancel it, then they're all upset and upset at the coaching staff for canceling them. And as you said, that's the one way of, besides Hugo Perez going to games or watching footage of players, That's his way of bringing them in and seeing, can these guys adjust? Can these guys go through the portal of going from, the going into warp speed of international play versus, La Liga Mayor de Salvador? That's what the microciclos are for, is so he can see, can this person hang once we start playing on nicer fields, once we start using tactics that involved marking, pushing up, pressing, whatever it is, can this player translate into that? And that's why you have castings, and the castings have always occurred with other coaches. And the only way that you can get to your core 11 is by doing that casting. And, you know, I've questioned some of the rotations in the past, and I think, with every right, um, I think it's interesting that he's giving play. I think the theme of this call up would be second chance. He tried to make a statement with the Gold Cup over the summer by, leaving out a lot of the veterans, the players that he inherited. He presented us with the squad of players that he basically picked, that he involved in the national team, without any, antecedents on the senior squad other than like Chicho, right? Now that didn't necessarily work. He was exposed in a sense, but just for trying to look for results and improving, not conforming, he's giving the second opportunity to a couple players. So we'll see how that plays out. And I think it is important to acknowledge that concept of the second opportunities. Is that going to be equal for everyone that's been called up and never called back again? You don't know. But I think the fact that you're having the pieces that are bringing in show that potential of more cohesiveness, and just thinking that you're going to have Roldan on the right and he's going to be free to do his thing. I'm pretty excited to see what can come of, the next two match days. There's a lot to look forward in that sense. I remember watching a video over the summer of someone saying that El Salvador's attack had peaked, that they had just hit a stalemate. I think in a sense that the attack under Hugo Perez had reached a plateau. And that was especially evident pre Brian Hill. But once he was called up, there's room to figure out, okay, how do you use a guy like this? And I think the adjustments have been made, and it's no accident that Hugo Perez is just going to put numbers in the midfield and in the final third. I think that's something we're going to see a lot. And as long as the center back duo and the center mid are able to hold their lines, not give up too much spaces, we can avoid those mistakes out of the back. I think this team has potential to do pretty decent in the months coming up.
What would you consider a decent performance in the next two games?
I mean, considering that we're away at Guate, and just how hyped or how much energy, positive energy, it seems to be coming out of the national team, I think a draw would be a great result. Obviously, I'd want to win. We all want to win, but I think, a decent result would be a draw away. I mean, it's kind of cliche in that sense, but I think considering how Guate has a chip on its shoulder, and especially against us, and the whole Roldan situation of him choosing El Salvador or Guate, and then how they've been revamping their team and trying to recruit more dual nationals, including Jair Aspiria, who played for the youth teams of El Salvador, and now he's been called up for a camp with Guate. Just there's a lot of energy behind this game, and yeah, I think a draw would be a decent performance, but obviously I want the win. And then against Trinidad, I think it's a little more of a, I don't know if a coin toss, but you can expect a quicker, more physical team. All the cliches when it comes to a strong Caribbean side. But we'll see how playing and then Mexico will affect this team if at all. It's the first home game since the tragedy occurred in Cusca. So, and then also because of the repairs being done at Cusca, it's not available. So you have a whole new venue, a whole different routine. I bet if you ask the players or the coaches, they would downplay that type of scenario, but we'll see how that goes. I want to win there, but I expect a draw. So uh I I think a draw against Wata would be great, and a win versus Trinidad would be great, but I'm leaning more towards a draw against Trinidad. So that's just my take. That's what I'm expecting.
Nobody asked me, but me, on the other hand, I have a slightly different view. I agree with everything you said about Wate and their moment. Although I must say, in my opinion, I don't think that we're that far from Wate. Like some people make it seem like it.
No, yeah,
I
no,
mean,
I
we
think
we might get a
we
bad
get
result. I
draws
don't know,
against
but
them for a reason, you know?
yeah. Yeah, but to me, it's like we're still very similar. Of course, they have more they have more of a momentum going on. We have kind of dropped a little bit, but in football and soccer, you can get that momentum from in one game. One game can shift everything. Let's not forget Panamá contra El Salvador, la eliminatoria del 2010.
Lo mazo.
Because Panama was not who Panama is now, but Panama was starting to get
They were
to
knocking
where
on the
we are
door.
now.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that game, I think, changed everything. Anyways, for me, what I expect in Guatemala, I do expect a very hostile environment, which is, I'm not saying it in the negative way. It's normal. That's what Central America is. And when some of the new players that we have played in an environment like that in Honduras was doing really bad. So it was like, I don't know, maybe 40-50% of the stadium was filled up. Guatemala is not going to be like that. It's going to be a lot of energy in that stadium. So for me, against Guatemala, what I'm looking for is a good performance of the team. Of course, I want to win. Of course, I want to making a point, getting a draw, visiting is a good result. But for me, it's like the focus would be more how the team performs as a team. That includes the possibility of losing that game. If the team performs well, I think I will be okay with that. And in Trinidad and Tobago, I think that I think we have to go for the 3 points. I think we can win against Trinidad and Tobago, but I do think that that game is important to get the 3 points at home. Yes, the atmosphere is going to be different than El Cusca because you have that track. People are not as close. Is maybe less of that intense pressure that visitors feel when they go to El Salvador. So that's that. But then you gain a better field to play in the way that we want to play. But also you're playing a Caribbean team who tends to be very fast and physical. So having a nice field also plays in their favor in a way. But it plays for both. I mean, I think a good field is a good thing for both teams. But I do think that we do need the 3 points against Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah, just a reminder too that within the League A, Group A, you have Martinique, Panama, Trinidad y Tobago, Guate, and Curacao. So, we're going to need the points anywhere we get them. We can't be losing them at home. That's why I'm hoping for a win at home in that draw away. I think that's the most logical expectations to have of them, even a tad conservative. But I think if we can get numbers into the final third, if we can we can play off of each other and get that build up going, and then look for weaknesses and make adjustments when necessary. I think El Salvador has a little more balanced squad than the one going into Gold Cup, because you were seeing Harold Osorio getting thrown out there and Machito getting thrown out there with, few international caps. And now you're seeing some guys come back that have that experience of being in hostile environments, but also have played off of each other, and they've proven that they can. And I think that's a huge deal in terms of moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is in alignment with what I said earlier, that I do think we have a balanced squad where we have experience, and you do need experience for the type of games that are coming up. And we have players who can create damage, especially against the Caribbeans. I do know there's the whole physicality thing, but I think Armando, El Machito, even Dustin, I think those are players that if we play the ball into spaces very, very quickly, quick transitions in the final third, with the advantage of having Brian up there, I think that we can create damage. I think that we can make a lot of damage against teams like Trinidad and Tobago. Of course, we need, like you said, we need our core in the center mid, and our defense to
That
be
column.
to be on point with if we lose a ball, that we don't have this huge amount of space open, because they're fast. They're the Caribbean teams are very fast and can create a lot of damage. So obviously requires a good performance from everyone.
Did you find that puma out in the woods? Did you bring that
Yes.
puma?
Yep.
For people listening to the podcast, this feline just walked right across the screen, but Ugo is safe. He's okay. No harm will come to him. But before we close out, because we can only talk about the list so much, but what would be your prediction for the mid? Because we've seen Hugo Perez come out with the 4-4-1-1 the last two matches. I don't think he's going to change that up too much, considering how well it went against Costa Rica and also Panama, two Central American rivals. Here we are playing another Central American rival. I don't think he's going to vary too much off of that. If he goes with the 4 in the mid, who do you think would be in it?
I would start with the Cristian Martinez and Chicho Orellana in the holding mid. On the right side, I would do Roldan on the right side, and on the left, I want to say on the left, I will probably go with Dustin Correa on the left. Because Roldan maybe is not a very offensive player. Like he's not too much in going on the 1v1 like a Jairo, for example. But he is a very solid player with the ball, and I think we're gonna need that in both games. With Guatemala, because I'm expecting a lot of energy and a lot of intensity. And Guatemala is a team that plays very fast as well. They have a lot of fast players. So we need that stability that a Roldan can give you and a Cristian Martinez can give you in the midfield. A little bit more of a defensive minded player like Roldan. And of course against the Caribbeans, you need some of that too, and you can kind of switch around depending on how the game is going. But I think that would be my mid. I will go with Roldan on the right, Chicho Orellana, Cristian Martinez in the mid, and Dustin maybe on the left.
And now I think would be like the coin flip. Who would you put right under Brian Hill? Who would be the 10?
For the moment that he's having, I will go with Armando. just because he scored 2 goals yesterday. He's on fire. I hope that also he brings that along to the national team. It's unknown. Obviously, playing in the national team is different than playing in the league. Whichever league you play, but players go through moments. Just like Jairo. We saw that in the Gold Cup. Perhaps he didn't put his best performance compared to what he did in the qualifiers. Players go through moments. And I think that Armando is going through that moment right now in his career after the injury.
Yeah, I agree. I think just based off of rewatching some of Armando's performances in the 2021 Gold Cup, I'd say you give him room to roam about, not necessarily be the playmaker, but be able to feed him the ball and create space. He's really good at connecting with those around him, not as a 10, but just he knows whether to break lines by himself or through a touch or through a run that he makes. So, yes, I think he would be, in my opinion, the ideal partner with Bryan Gil in the 4-4-1-1. We saw against, I think it was against Panama, where Bryan Gil would come back to the mid. Josh Perez would kind of play up. Bryan Gil would get that burst. Josh Perez would make a run. Bryan Gil would make that touch. But for whatever reason, it was just not there for Josh Perez and he couldn't get to it. There was a lot of like disconnections in terms of whenever they would tweak things a little bit. Bryan Gil would come back and look for Perez. They'd get lost. There wasn't that connection that you need, that is essential in that part of the field. And I'm hoping, based off of past performances and his current performances, that Armando can be that guy that can play off of Bryan Gil and they can make stuff happen in the final third, which is what we've been missing basically since the Gold Cup of 2021, in my opinion. All right. Well, I think that's it for talking about the list. We're going to continue working on getting guests, whether in English or in Spanish. And so, yeah, we'll try and get back at you with more selecta vids of the past Gold Cup, also of the games coming up within the next couple of weeks. But also, again, want to thank everyone that's been with us for these last 3 years. We're going to keep going at it and keep having fun covering the team, talking about the team, talking with members of the team, most importantly, which has been I'd say the most thrilling part of this is just having that connection with the team beyond just sitting on a couch and getting pissed at the TV. Has been cool to talk with the athletes, the coaching staff, the protagonists of the team that we all love. That's why we've chosen that hashtag, This Kid Chose Me. We can pick any type of team to follow, any type of sport that we like, but when it comes to the national team, it picks us. So, for better, for worse, we're just a couple of guys doing a podcast on the team that we love, that chose us, and we're going to keep at it. And for everyone new, thanks for joining us. Please keep sharing the word on the podcast. We're glad you found us. Help us find other people along the way. And we'll catch you guys next time. Have a great one.